Hey, everybody, welcome to our monthly live stream in the TLB Club or the Thought Leaders Brand Club. My name is Bob Umar. I am a motivational speaker by trade. Over the last 20 years, I've done 1,000 keynotes and workshops across 4 continents. I'm also a 5-time TEDx speaker and a 3-time TEDx invite decliner. And I'm also the founder of the Thought Leaders Brand Club, which is a membership community designed to help small business owners level up their game digitally with branding, sales, and everything else. And we do a monthly live stream where we talk about thought leadership. We talk about different topics that come up. And this month's topic is public speaking to build thought leadership. So I hope you'll join us for this hour. And if you are joining this conversation, feel free to share in the chat. You can reply to the tweets, or you can share in the comments section on LinkedIn and Instagram and other places that we're going live. Tell us a bit about where you're from, and then of course you're more than welcome to ask questions of the panel, and they're going to introduce themselves in a minute. So looking forward to a really good conversation with everybody. And I'm also grateful for my panel today. I'm going to actually start off by sending it over to you guys to introduce yourself. So we'll start with you, Melanie, and then we'll go to Lorraine.
Yeah, I'm Melanie Deziel. I am also a speaker by trade. I have been a keynote speaker for about 10 years now. I don't have as many TEDx decline numbers to be able to cite, but I spent a lot of time doing corporate trainings, workshops, really trying to teach people how to tell better stories and how to use content and storytelling as a way to build their brand and connect with their audience. I'm a 2-time author, and I run a community called the Creator Kitchen, which is for creative types, people with newsletters, blogs, YouTube channels, things like that, helping them to up-level their craft and in a world that's focused on quantity instead of quality.
Awesome. Well, I guess that's my turn. Hello, everyone. I'm Lorraine. I'm actually calling in from Asia today, but normally I'm based in San Francisco. I am a speaker as well. But before my speaking career, I spent the first decade of my career as a founding editor at various tech firms like LinkedIn and Prezi. And it was just a few years ago that I started speaking, and now I do it professionally. And I feel so lucky and thankful to be doing that. I have a speaking business. I do consulting. I teach at LinkedIn Learning and Stanford Continuing Studies. And the through line topic that permeates through all those different things I do is teaching professionals how to supercharge their professional presence. And when I say presence, I mean it in both senses of the word. So both how and where others see you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for that. So let's start with the first question, which I think is the most important one, is why is speaking so important? So I kind of want to get into that. Lorraine, I'll go to you first, and then and the rest of us can pipe in after that.
Sure. So like I said, I only started speaking really like speaking in vain at the start of 2021. So thankfully, there was a lot of virtual events happening where I really got to practice. But essentially what happened is I was at Prezi at the time, and we all had to come up with personal goals for ourselves. And I thought, okay, I'm working at this presentation company. I should feel more comfortable public speaking and presenting. And so I just took it on myself as a personal goal. And also, I'd seen so many speakers out there, most notably my colleague Spencer, who just seemed so confident, so articulate, so many, good adjectives when he speaks well and when others speak well. And I wanted to have that be part of, my skill set as well. And the more I did it, the more visibility I got, right? People started inviting me to speak at events, being interviewed on podcasts, being interviewed for articles, etc. And it really elevated my visibility and my profile, especially when I combined that with posting on LinkedIn. And so I would be curious for what Melanie and you, Bobby, both think. But public speaking is very scary to a lot of people. So I think that when you can do it well, it really helps you stand out, shine amongst, such a competitive market right now, right? So it really just highlights you in the best way possible and really shows, it's a skill that can take you very far in whatever direction you choose to take your career in.
I think for me, it started very similarly. It was something I was doing as part of my company. At the time, I was at the New York Times heading up their T brand studio, their branded content team. And there was a colleague of mine who was meant to present some research. They weren't able to make it. And so I was a fill-in. And so when I started, I was presenting other people's stuff, right? And so I was really fulfilling this goal of like representing my team and my company well, and hopefully, representing their research well as well. And I discovered that I loved it, that feeling of being on stage, of educating, of being helpful, of teaching people things was really enjoyable for me. And it was something I wanted to do more. So it was something that for me at the time, I was not thinking about it so much as a personal brand. It was more like, this is a really rewarding part of my, corporate role, that I get to share the work we're doing with others. And it wasn't until a few years later, when I went out on my own, that I realized what a powerful tool it could be for brand building, for reputation building, for connecting with new clients. So it serves a lot of different purposes for me now, as it's evolved over the years. The biggest one being that most of my business is actually inbound business that comes from people who see me speak on a stage. And that has ripple effects as well, where if someone can't hire me after seeing me on stage, they might invite me on their podcast or invite me to join a conversation like this one, which then kind of creates more opportunities rolling from there. So for me, it has been probably my biggest source of marketing, in a way that's how I'm getting in front of people. It's how I'm meeting new potential clients and partners. And as a side benefit, like, some of my best friends in the whole world are fellow speakers that I get to, hang out with in different cities, different countries around the world. And we get to bond on this weird little job that we've managed to create for ourselves.
Well, I like how you've already shared a bit about your story in terms of how you got started, which is kind of nice to hear. I mean, I think for me, a quick story is that I kind of couldn't figure out what I want to do with my life. I had 4 different careers: engineering, brand marketing, performing arts, and teaching. And I was like, what do I want to do? I finally dove into my personal brand after my last corporate job. And I was like, what do I really want to do? And people had said, you should do speaking. I just dismissed it. I was like, well, no, I got to build my career in brand marketing. I got to build my career here. But I had always enjoyed working with youth as a camp counselor and doing programs and here and there. And when I did my personal brand kind of deep dive, things came out that Bobby likes people, nurturing, performing, persuasion, and diversity. So I was like, you know what? Speaking is definitely something I should do. So I decided to launch a speaking business when I didn't have anything else, right during the recession in 2007, 2008. And it didn't go well at first. I also had my first child. And so it was a long haul to grow it in the beginning. But definitely the TEDx thing happened in 2011, so that kind of changed things for me. But I would say that why speaking is so important. Well, I think that one of the things that we know is that when it comes to thought leadership, there's this idea of positioning yourself as an expert and sharing your expertise with the world. And so we do this in different ways: books, programs, content, speaking, all that kind of stuff. But I found, and networking and building relationships and things like that. So, before the speaking thing, I was a big networker. But speaking to me is the greatest tool we have to actually build thought leadership, only because it incorporates networking and relationship building. It incorporates sharing your subject matter expertise. It incorporates, it creates far greater, it's better content live and in person than, say, doing a video or even this live stream. And this live stream is there, but people can't come up to us afterwards and talk to us. And so for me, I thought speaking was the best way to do all those things. And so for me, it's a very, very powerful way to get noticed, to build trust, to build likability. They know your personality. And so that's why I like it, for all the different reasons. That's why speaking, I think, is a huge part of thought leadership. And the other thing I learned too later on was that I used to always say, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm a professional speaker. But I realized later on that it wasn't really about that. It was like, what are you an expert on? Because well, I'm actually an expert in personal branding and digital marketing and relationship
Yeah.
building. And so that's why I have a book, and that's why I have a program. That's why I also do coaching. Speaking is my primary thing I love to do. But in the beginning, that's kind of how I evolved. So I appreciate that. And when did you guys? I say thought leadership. When did you guys start thinking about thought leadership as something that was, I guess, in your vernacular, and relating it to speaking? I'm just curious about that, Melanie.
So like I mentioned, when I first started speaking, I was doing it on behalf of my company. So I really wasn't thinking about it in that way. It wasn't until maybe, I think, a year or two into it, when I started to think about starting my own thing, stepping out of the corporate environment, and putting my own shingle up as a consultant, as a coach, and as a corporate trainer, that I saw the value, sort of on the other side as an individual, and realizing that speaking is an incredible tool to be able to share your perspective, your approach. For me, I'm a person who likes to create frameworks, systems, proprietary IP of some sort. And so it was a way for me to share those tools and establish authority, as you're saying. I had the distinct pleasure of having the brand of the New York Times and Time Inc. behind me as well, but I needed to be able to continue that process of building reputation after I was no longer flying their flag on the stage. And so speaking really allowed me to do that in a couple different ways, not just to be able to say that I'm a speaker, I'm trusted by these organizations who bring me in to do trainings, to keynote their events, but also to be able to put your ideas forth. And as I talked about earlier, it for me had many follow-on effects, follow-on benefits of being able to, have that lead to going to podcasts or joining different events, being invited to speak to a mastermind, those sort of more hidden opportunities that flowed from that. So it wasn't my initial intent, but it was something I realized really quickly can be incredibly powerful if you're looking to build that expertise and build your reputation.
I feel like my story was similar to you, Melanie, in that at least, I talk about thought leadership a lot as it pertains to
Yeah.
LinkedIn. I was a founding editor there, as I mentioned. And so, we were the team that got access to, posting content early on, but I only posted things that I was creating on behalf of LinkedIn. So very much, any content I put out there was tied to the company. And then I joined Prezi, and then I didn't post for a little bit just because I was just wanting to focus on my new job. And I also didn't know what I wanted to post about. And then the speaking and the posting sort of came together where, okay, I wanted to post about the events where I was speaking at. And then I realized, I don't want to just be posting promotional things. I also want to be providing value and educating people and also connecting with people, right? And building relationships, not just me kind of shouting out at everyone. And so that's when I started thinking more thoughtfully, what do I actually like to talk about? What is my area of expertise? Similar to you, I've worked at some really cool brands. So what have I learned from those places that I can take and sort of share out with the world? So I guess there was never a moment where I was like, I'm going to be a thought leader. I think people sort of just call you that once you start posting more frequently and sort of gain an audience and all of that. But I think to be able to feel comfortable putting your voice out there, and it can be really scary and uncomfortable, but once you sort of push past that, stay consistent, stick with it, it really can do wonders for your career and again, your visibility.
Yeah, I think for me, like thought leadership, it came to me actually during the pandemic. I mean, I'd heard
Mm.
the term and I saw people were talking about it, but then during the pandemic, when my entire speaking business collapsed, I was like, what am I going to do? And so I started talking to lots and lots of people. I think I did like 400 Zoom calls in 2020, and I was trying to find what else can I do, and two kind of themes emerged. One was storytelling, how to become a storyteller. And so I was like, I do that already with my content, and I could teach a workshop on that, on like a virtual workshop. But the other one was thought leadership because I had already built a huge presence on Twitter with 500,000 followers, and I was building I've already built the LinkedIn thing, and I was building on Instagram as well. And so people are like, you have experience with digital marketing and personal branding, but thought leadership is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get better at the digital space. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. So then I launched a thought leadership program. I was like, let's talk about thought leadership. And I laid out and I started reading all the articles on it and what it entailed. And I was like, okay, let me put together a 5-day, like a 5-hour, like a 5-session program on this thing. And that's what I did. And it just kind of took off. People loved talking about this. They loved the idea of thought leadership. It appealed to corporate organization, and so it became part of all my keynotes workshops. So I started this thought leadership is a thing, and then for me, when we were in the pandemic, I got hooked up to a Clubhouse because we were all on social audio, just talking to people because I was lonely washing dishes and talking to people, and we started the Thought Leadership Brand Club there. It was a TLB club, which is there on the screen. And we started just becoming a community of amazing people. And then we decided, thought leadership is a big deal. Then I turned it into a company called the Thought Leadership Brand Club. So, so that's kind of how thought leadership. And now I see where it fits in so many different pockets. Before, I was always talking about networking, relationship building, personal branding, getting your voice out there, public speaking, but it all relates. So I think that's great.
I think you make a really good point too, where like when people think public speaking, they think a big stage in an auditorium with 1,000 people. And there's a lot of ways that those skills transfer into different environments. Like that's giving a webinar digitally, that's going live like we are on Instagram, on LinkedIn, wherever, and presenting to your audience. It's Clubhouse. Clubhouse was such a really cool opportunity for people who had a voice and had thoughts to share, but maybe weren't so comfortable on video, or because of the pandemic, were not in a video friendly environment, right? Their house wasn't a set or a stage like many of us, have set up. And I think it was really cool to watch during that period. And like, was that like late 2020 when Clubhouse really kind of skyrocketed, and so many people who didn't have a place and a voice before really got to have their moment in the sun. And that was really cool to watch, to see public speaking be applied in an audio only context. It was really fun to watch.
Yeah, and listen, everyone who's listening, we would love to get your questions, right? So, I mean, we have some amazing speakers here. If you want to put a question in the comment section, by all means, share it. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know where you're calling in from. Are you from North America, South America, Asia, Europe, Africa, Australia? We'd love to know where you're from. But let's get some questions for them. I mean, I'm going to hound them questions, of course, but you're more than welcome to ask questions. And I also post on my beside my face, join the TLB Club. If you want to learn about TLB Club, what it does, if you're a small business owner, if you're a freelancer, a side hustler, whatever that might be, you want to learn about what membership will give you, take a look at the website and let me know what you think. But this is brought to you by the Thought Leadership Brand Club. But we want to hear your question, we want to hear your comments. So definitely give us those things. That's what we want to see. I want to go to into the idea of when you're starting out as let's say a professional paid speaker, right? Tell me a bit more about what will be some of the challenges. I mean, so Lorraine, like I know you had a job, another job, then transition. So then, for you, what would you say were the challenges for you in the early stages?
Mm, I think the main one was finding opportunities, because when you're just starting off, you're like, where do I even go? Who wants to bring me in? And it was about getting in those reps and getting the experience and finding logos and people who are willing to, maybe take a chance on you, or to, people who are interested in your topic to bring you in. So I think it's a combination of finding the places to speak, and then also figuring out exactly what I wanted to speak on. And again, I mentioned I started sort of around the start of 2021, and the company I was working for was leaning really hard into video communications, and also I had an interest in it. So that was my first talk, actually talking about video communications and video on LinkedIn, because that was the link to my two main pieces of experience, work experience. So that's what I came up with there. But I think, yeah, like coming up with the content is hard, right? You want to have a topic that's interesting. You want to connect it to things that you actually know, and then finding those opportunities as well at first. And for that, I really lean on my network and other people I worked with. And again, at the start of 2021, there were a lot of virtual events happening. So I feel like I probably did it opposite to you two, where you both started off in person, but I started off virtual, and then now I'm in person.
I think for me, your point about finding the events is really tough. I think if you're also coming at this without a background that you're familiar with the space, like understanding the speaking industry and how those decisions get made and when those decisions get made, I think this has changed a little bit since the pandemic. But early on, when I was starting, I would be reaching out to events assuming like, okay, it's happening in a few months, they're probably looking for speakers, and discovering, my goodness, they're booking people a year in advance, 16 months in advance. That's not the case as much now. Now, COVID and post-COVID, the timelines are much shorter, but there's those kind of learning curves where you're trying to understand, when are these decisions being made? Who are the decision makers? What titles do they have? Like, how do you kind of work your way into this whole industry? Like, it's a whole business with its own culture, its own expectations, its own processes that you kind of have to figure out. I think when you're going through that process, it's immensely helpful to find, in a official capacity or not, some sort of mentor, someone inside the speaking industry who can answer your questions, who can help you understand, because those little tips and tricks, like, hey, try to reach out, at least in the early days, like 12 to 18 months in advance before the event, if you want to try to pitch yourself. Or here are the things that event organizers are thinking about, because the way you pitch your talk to someone who's hiring speakers, they're not the person in the audience, right? You're not pitching necessarily, why your talk is amazing. You're pitching what their audience is going to get from it and why they look good to their boss picking you, right? So it's like all these little nuances of kind of understanding the culture, the context around speaking and putting events together. I think that was the biggest learning curve for me, and once I felt like I had a good understanding of that, it seemed a lot easier to kind of work my way into that world and into those conversations. And I also think a lot of people struggle with pricing early on because, again, especially if you don't come from that world, the idea that people get paid to do this is kind of crazy. I remember,
Yeah.
Lorraine, you were maybe in a similar boat. When you go on behalf of your company, you're rarely
Mhm.
getting paid. Like your company's paying your salary while you're there, and like, they're covering your travel. That's pretty much it. So I remember realizing like, wait a second, like these other people are getting paid like beyond that to be here. Like there's a whole standalone job that I could be doing. And that was a really important realization for me as I was planning to leave corporate and set up my own thing, was to understand that's a change, right? I'm not going on my company's dime anymore. I'm going on my own dime, which means I need to start getting comfortable asking, do you cover travel expenses? What budget do you have to pay for professional speakers? And also understanding that I have to, if I'm being paid for this work, I have to take it seriously. I have to treat it like a job. I have to rehearse and prepare and have a coach and spend time on professional design for my slides because I'm a product now. I'm not a representative of my company anymore. So I think those two kind of shifts of like understanding the industry and then shifting from representing your company to like being a product you have to sell were the two biggest kind of switches for me early on.
All right, you took mine about the pricing thing, but I want to talk briefly about the mentoring thing. So mentoring is actually a good one. I love that. I My first mentor was Sanjay Nath, and he gave me some questions, and he said, "Come up with 3 topics, and here's the pricing you should do." Like he was very helpful to me because I didn't know what to price, what to pitch, what to have. And what fun the and funny thing was I had those 3 original topics of which I presented twice, and then I revolved them, and I never did the other ones ever. So but he
Yeah.
was good. And then later on, Ron Tite, our common friend, Melanie,
Yeah.
I asked him to be my mentor a few years later. I was like, hey, listen, I want you to mentor me. So those mentors were really, really powerful. But I'd say for me, the initial thing was pricing and also what do I want to talk about? Because
Yeah.
I'm one of those people that's a jack of all trades, master of none. That's why the personal brand thing was really helpful for me because I had all these topics I could talk about. And so
Yeah.
I sent out this survey and I got these people, 100 people to answer, like, what are the things I can talk about? And in the beginning, there was lots of team building, networking, leadership. Like, it was
Yeah.
so much stuff. And then also how to price it. I had no idea because it was just so difficult. And then to raise my price eventually. And it was an interesting thing. One of the things that my mentor told me was that at some point you're going to learn what you're not going to get out of bed for. Like there's going to be this low range and a high range, and you're going to say, no, I'm not doing that anymore. And I
Yeah.
remember I'll be very transparent. When I first started speaking, I was pitching $500, right? So $500, I will
That's
come in.
typical.
You know, it is. It was very
Yeah.
low, but it's very typical.
Yeah.
And then, but I remember someone trying to squeeze me for $300. Oh, okay, sure, I'll do it. And then I did a lot of free stuff in the beginning too. And then later on, it went up to like 1,500, and then my low end was like 800. That's if they said 500,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm gonna. And eventually, the lower end increased and the higher end increased, but there was this low end where I would not go. I'm sorry, I cannot even
Yeah.
consider this. And so, but it was interesting to see that one time someone came to me, and I'll share a quick story, which was someone came to me and said, "Bobby, I want you to do a personal branding workshop for us, 3 hours for this group. We'll give you $3,700." And uh, I remember like, wow, that at the time it was the highest number I said no to because I was like, 3 hours customized? That's a lot of work and a lot of
Yeah.
time versus
Yeah.
my established keynotes I already had in the bag. I could just go do it right.
Yeah.
Oh man. So I was like, I don't want, and I was like, wow, okay, I definitely don't want to do this. Like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Is it okay? But what I did was I gave it to a friend of mine who wanted to do it as part of my company. And I took a 25% cut. So
Yeah.
I found ways around it, but that's kind of for me, pricing was a huge challenge. And even now it still can be as well.
I think it puts two thoughts come to mind. One being that the other thing that I think a lot of new speakers or like aspiring speakers don't realize is you do not want to be cooking up something fresh every single time. That sounds counterintuitive, like you feel this pressure, like I gotta have something new. But the reality is, this is the analogy I always give. When you go see your favorite band, when someone has hired a band to do an event, a musician, like they're not testing out new stuff they've never played before. Like they're hitting the greatest hits because they know they can do it well. And so when you make that shift to like a professional speaker, it's like you said, Bobby, you have like a few talks that you know like the back of your hand that you can show up and deliver that are going to be high quality. And you might customize the title, the branding of the slides to match the company hosting or whatever. You might put in different examples for a certain industry, but like the vast majority of what you're presenting should be stuff that you know that you've presented before that you're really comfortable with. And I think a lot of new speakers get tripped up there because they feel like they've got to go ahead and create a brand new talk, a brand new everything each time. And that is exhausting and expensive from a time standpoint to have to do that.
And I think my biggest challenge right now is coming up with just the three topics, because I have, you know, even on my speaker sheet for my agent, I have like 6 topics. It's a lot
Yeah.
of topics, and I find it really hard to hone in on the one. Now we have some people who are now engaging, asking questions, which is great.
Love it.
There's one question that I can't seem to find on the stream, but it's on LinkedIn. It's from Joey Himmelfarb. What are things that you did that you would have done differently now that you're experienced?
Good question.
Yeah, great
Well,
question.
I think I'll reiterate that last point of I definitely was reinventing the wheel every single event or early on, like new talks. And I wouldn't do that anymore. I would do what we're saying here of having like 1, 2, maybe 3 when you're starting out, really core events, really core talks that you kind of customize a little bit. The other thing is I think I should have charged more sooner. And you kind of hit on that, Bobby. Like when you first start, it feels uncomfortable. So you're like, I don't know, do you maybe have like $500? You know, you kind of like come in shy. And I think, and we can talk about this, Bobby, if you want to get into it. Like, I'm happy to just share like the basic progressions of fees. But I think to start out, start by asking for $1,000, because if they say
Agreed.
no, like then you go down to 500. If you ask for 5, they're going to talk you down to 2, right? Or 1. And the
Yeah.
next thing you know, you're losing money going to teach on someone else's time, right? So we can definitely talk through that. That I think the pricing is probably one of the earliest mistakes that a lot of people speak for free when they like. It's okay to speak for free when we can talk about that too, but speak for free when you should have or could have been paid better for that. And that helps, you know, especially if you're from a marginalized identity where people may be
Mm.
taking advantage of the fact that you don't know, you can come in and ask for more money. So happy to be radically transparent about what you should be asking for.
What about you, Lorraine? What would you do differently? Wait, I can't hear
I'm
you.
gonna
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna flip the question on its head a little bit and just share the things that I think worked very well at the beginning.
Sure.
So I think for me, one thing that I thought was very valuable was always asking for feedback at the end of my session. So I'm someone who loves feedback, will always ask for it. And it was very helpful, right? In a speaking context, especially when you're newer. And people would give me feedback sometimes. Oh, like I have a lot of animations in my talk, but this thing might have been a little bit distracting, or like, oh, like this part, I wish you had spent a little bit longer on it. And of course, take everything with a grain of salt. You don't have to listen to every piece of feedback. But generally, if you start seeing some trends, right? Like I would ask, okay, out of these, 3 sections that I spoke on today, which one resonated most with you? Or which one did you find most helpful, right? What did you find least helpful? So you can start adjusting and tweaking your content based on that audience feedback. And then also in those feedback surveys, I would ask people to rate me as a speaker. And so that gives you data right away that you can go to event planners or corporations and ask and let them know, okay, like this is what past audiences have said about me before. And you give them a little bit more social proof, especially when you are someone who's newer. So I think feedback was really key. And then the second thing that worked really well, my friend Ashley from Atlassian, Ashley Faust, she told me early on that having a speaker page where like a web page where you list your bios, your speaker track or your talk tracks, excuse me, your takeaways, all the things that event planners are going to need, have those very easily available, right? It's easy for you to copy and paste when you fill out submission forms, and it's also easy for them to get a better idea of who you are, what the takeaways will be, why they should hire you, right? So having that just easily accessible on your website, your headshot too, right? Make it as easy as possible for them. There are a lot of speakers out there, right? It's a competitive field. So I think just showing that you're prepared and just making things as easy as possible, I think was really valuable. And I don't know, Melanie, if you did that, or Bobby, you have a page as well with all those things, but that was very good
For
for me, I
sure.
think.
I like the cattail, by the way. That was great.
Yeah, they always find a way, right?
Yeah.
During the key
Well,
moments.
I'm worried that my kids are going to show up because they're getting ready to go to camp, and it's like, okay, they're going to show up and interrupt this thing. I'm like, I'm on live. But I'll say the biggest thing I would have done differently is get a coach.
Mhm.
For speaking my business, like having mentors was great, but I saw my mentors every 3 to 6 months. And I couldn't call them all the time. Having a coach to be more accountable, to 10x my results, to focus, and I probably would have grown my business far better in the first 3 to 5 years had I invested in a coach. I didn't get a coach until 2013. That's a long time from starting in 2007, right? So I think for me, that's what I definitely would have liked to have done, because coaching is so great for any sort of business you're trying to do. So for me, that's probably what I would have done. So
I think that makes a lot of good sense. I think on your point, Lorraine, about asking for feedback, one of my favorite tips that I got from a fellow speaker early on, was if people, will come up to you afterward if you're in an in-person event and be like, oh, I was taking notes. I would always ask to take a picture of their notes, and they're going to tell you, oh, my handwriting's horrible. Oh, sorry. Blah, blah, blah. It's okay. Take a picture anyway, because what that tells you is what was worthy of note, right? Like when they looked at your presentation, when they listened to you, what was worth writing down. And I found that so valuable, because sometimes the things that I thought were like not that big of a deal, I was realizing, wow, that's resonating really deeply with people. So many people are making note of that, or something I thought was really important never made it to the notes. So I guess that wasn't as powerful an example as I thought, or something like that. So that was really helpful. And to your point, Bobby, like having a coach, I think it also helps because especially if you are trying to make this part of your business, you do want to be paid. You need to invest in it the same way you would any other skill that you were
Right.
trying to improve. Like if you want to charge more, you need to be worth more. You need to work hard. You need to be professional. You need to polish. You need it takes time and investment, and a really good coach, along with mentors and having a good network of other speakers who you can trust, really helps you improve your craft, improve your performance, improve the quality of your content. And that's all going to be vital if you want to, continue to grow and improve.
And so I want to make sure we want to get to other questions, because there's so many questions now. So let's just get to this. Where did you get assistance on speaker sheets and how to pitch to event planners? I didn't. In
Yeah, I
the early
didn't.
days. In the early days.
I didn't.
Once I found community, I think some people had some things they would share, but it was very hard to find that stuff.
And I'll be honest, I don't have a speaker sheet. I've never had a speaker sheet. I mean, maybe it's different depending on who you're working with or what industry you're in. But what I have found, I'm mainly speaking to like events that are for marketers. And so they're less concerned about like a rigid speaker sheet, and they want to see more dynamic. They want the website, they want a video, they want examples of your past presentations. So I've never stressed too much about like a one sheet, although I know that was like absolutely key at one point, and many bureaus and agents will ask you for that. That's not something that I worry about too much. But how to pitch event planners, I think that's something that you can learn from a coach. You can learn from other speakers who are successful. And there are some like programs out there that aim to teach this kind of thing as well. I worked with a guy named Grant Baldwin who runs Booked and Paid to Speak, and he's someone that taught me a lot early on that process, email scripts and things like that. But I think some of that you also just learn with reps. Like the more you do it, the more you find what works, the more you'll determine what kind of information or approach is going to work best. I know that's not super helpful, but at bats really is sometimes the best way to learn some of those things, to just keep trying.
Yeah, I think learning by doing, that's a great point, Melanie. And I do have a speaker sheet. I don't know if it's if there's like an industry standard. I probably don't follow it if it is, but you can check mine out if it's interesting. LorraineKaylee.com/speaking. It's on there, but I just put what I think is the essential information on there, right? Logos, maybe some testimonials, some of the popular talk tracks. But yeah, I feel like my website is more robust, so I try to direct people there. But some people and companies do like a speaker sheet sometimes. I think sometimes when they're passing it to like a higher up, it's just easier for one person to look at it, someone to look at a sheet instead of maybe going through the whole website. But generally, I feel like the website works just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, you have to have, I mean, every single thing you have is an asset, right? So your LinkedIn profile, your website, your speaker sheet, you can have as many assets you want, but how often are they needed or used? That's the question to think about, right? So, I mean, for me, people go to my website and they'll see the speaking topics. But some people who are old school and want the PDF, or the printed thing way back in the day, like that's something that I have. But I do have speaker sheets, but I made them years ago. But now, do I ever use them? Almost never. So, because I have so much digital stuff out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a whole bunch of other questions on another feed that I completely missed. So I'm gonna maybe do a little bit of fire. What's that? What's it like? The
Rapid fire.
Rapid fire.
rapid fire. Yes. Okay. What's the most significant mindset to emulate when you're about to take the stand? When you're about to take the podium?
This might be unexpected or a hot take. I don't know. The thing that I remind myself before I get on stage is that I am here to serve and my job is to help people, because I think for me, if I get wrapped up in like, I want to look good, I want them to think I'm cool and smart, like that's when I get in my head and I get stressed out. If I show up with a spirit of service of like, my job here is to teach them something that's going to help them, make them better, make them stronger, whatever your purpose is, right? Like your mission, having that and in my heart center is what helps me perform my best. And it also allows me to react better in the moment. Because, we all rehearse for when things go perfectly right and there's no tech glitches and nobody says something in the audience and the fire alarm doesn't go off and whatever else, right? But if I know that I'm here not to look good, not to, whatever, but I'm here in service, then when stuff goes wrong, my brain says, how do I keep serving? Instead of like, oh no, this is a disaster. It doesn't look good. It's awkward, whatever. So yeah, I remind myself that I'm here to show up in service of the audience right before I go out. And that really helps me stay in the right mindset.
I think that's such a good one. I definitely resonate with that one. And then I would also add, my nerves, I think, often come from, not wanting to mess up or, yeah, again, like Melanie, right? Like you want to sound smart and this and that. But really like not wanting to mess up is really sort of the main thing that makes me nervous. But, when you think about like, you're there to help others. And again, like you are always your own worst critic. Like I remember the early days when I started speaking and I had, a few filler words here, and then I was like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing, everyone's going to notice this. And I watch it back and I'm like, oh, it's not a big deal at all. It's human. We all, have filler words and things like that. So to not worry about the mistakes, people are not there to judge you, to criticize you, to see you fail. Like people want you to succeed. So I think what Melanie said about, again, you're serving others and also that they are there to support you and they want to see you do well, I think have been really helpful for me.
I think for me, the biggest thing was be a teacher, not a speaker. So I'm there just to teach. And instead of trying to be a huge speaker, I'm not trying to be Barack Obama or Tony Robbins. I'm just trying to there to teach something, and I focus on that, and that definitely helps with mindset. Good stuff. Another question: how do you pitch yourself to other organizations to speak at their conference, all hands event? Do you need to show a reel?
Yes.
You do need to show a reel?
So I think, like we said, a lot of assets are all helpful. Sometimes, some folks will be very rigid and it's like, we have a form, we need the reel, we need the sheet, we need the XYZ. But the best thing to show is that you are experienced. And sometimes you show that with a reel. Sometimes you show it with photos from other events with logos. You could show it with testimonials. So it'll depend. But I think the kind of coming back to all of us talking about like the purpose is when you are pitching to think, am I going to help their audience? That is like the approach to take when you're pitching, because they don't necessarily care how cool you are, how smart you are, any of those things. Their goal is, I need someone who can teach my audience X, or I need someone who can achieve Y for my audience. So coming in with their audience at the center of your mind, I think is a really good way to put yourself forward.
That's great.
I also add, yeah, Melanie, yeah, plus one to all of that. One point I want to make, and I get asked this as well sometimes, is when you are just starting off, how do you get the footage and the photos and all of that? So we talked earlier about maybe sometimes doing free events. Always good to ask, are there going to be videographers or photographers? Like that could be a really good reason for you to speak somewhere for free, right? Because you get all this professional footage. You also don't have to actually be speaking to get assets, right, for your website or for your speaker reel. You can go to a university nearby, there's going to be a stage, hop onto that
Conference
stage.
room.
Yeah, exactly. Have a friend take photos. Like there's a lot of hacks. So you fake it till you make it. It does not, you do not have to have a gig to get that footage. And so just remember that, you can kind of piecemeal it together and make it work.
Bobby, I know we're doing rapid fire. Forgive me for a moment for interrupting. But
Sure.
on the note of free events, one thing I just want to throw out there is if you are starting out, rather than saying you'll do it for free, I really recommend you saying you're willing to waive your fee in exchange for something. So if they're saying, well, we don't have budget, and you say, well, are you going to have a photographer or a videographer there? Because if you can provide me with that footage, I'm willing to waive my fee. It allows you to still
I
be,
love getting the video. Yes.
yeah, it
Professional
allows you to
video,
still be,
fantastic.
yeah, then you're still a speaker who charges whatever you charge, but you've made the decision to waive the fee. They feel like you're doing them a favor. You're getting the assets you need, and it's not you speaking for free. It's you saying, I'm willing to waive my fee in exchange for this thing that I really value. And that could be footage, testimonials, introductions. There's a lot of things you can get that are valuable.
Yeah, video testimonials, the email list, and the ability to pitch something. Like those are things that I really do like. So I want to quickly go to a question just for Lorraine. Actually, it's from Jason Springer. Lorraine, where did you start? Who did you network with, and who mentored you to influence this decision on your current career path?
Honestly, had never thought about becoming a solopreneur. I got impacted by the tech layoffs at the end of 2022. However, I had started doing the public speaking, like I mentioned, while I was at Prezi. And so that had started to lend itself to more opportunities, like becoming a LinkedIn learning instructor, like getting my first paid gig. And I realized, that was the first time I actually made money outside of my day job. And so that really started to open my eyes to see what was possible. And so at the end of 2022, had this decision, apply for another job or try to do this thing on my own. And I decided to do the latter. And so I started my business in January of 2023. So it's been a little bit over a year and a half. And it's been wonderful, learning new things every day, trying a bunch of new things, meeting new and interesting people. So I guess I sort of got pushed into it, blessing in disguise, as they say, about layoffs. But it's been really wonderful. I feel like I've just grown so much through it. And so, again, like public speaking is a core piece of that, and it sort of leads to a bunch of other opportunities.
Okay, great. And next question is, what is your opinion on belonging to speaker associations?
I'm not in any, so I don't know
Okay.
if I
Okay.
take Melanie.
I think a speaker association can be valuable. It can depend largely on what the association is, what chapter you're a member of, and who the other members are. So I'm not going to like endorse or speak ill of any specific organization. Just having, as someone who has been in several and been in different chapters, you'll find that each chapter, which is like your region, will have a different culture. So when I was in the New York City chapter of the National Speakers Association, for example, there was a lot of young, active speakers. We were all supporting one another. It was a really active, like big membership chapter, right? I moved down to Raleigh, North Carolina, and here I don't have a local chapter. It's a combined chapter of several states. So we meet less frequently because we're more spread out and people are in different phases of life and they live in different regions. So it's less of a tight community. No less valuable, just a different type of valuable, right? So I think look at what is the organization and chapter that's nearest you. You can usually go to a meeting as a guest or like as a one-time sample, so to speak, and see if the culture is a fit for you and what you're looking for. The important thing to remember is that an association or a bureau or any sort of organization will not get you gigs. They will not say, oh, this is our member, you should hire them. That's not how that works. Like they are networking opportunities for you to meet other speakers, maybe get introductions, but like joining a speaker association is not necessarily a pathway to like fame, fortune, and tons of gigs, which I think sometimes might be the perception from the outside.
So I would say that in the early days, I didn't actually join the speaker associations and it was a different path for me because I already had a very strong network. And it leads to me to the important piece, which is you need to have community. Everyone needs community. So I had a community of entrepreneurs in Toronto, and I was leveraging that. I had a community of people from my corporate life, and I was leveraging that. So I built those communities. But having a community is really important. So a place for you to share wins, share losses, share challenges, learn from each other, share resources. The one of the things about speaking is that it's not competition, it's co-opetition. We all cooperatively help each other out. We all want each other to win. When I speak somewhere, they may not want me next year. So I tell my other buddy who also talks about personal branding to refer them to the same event. And they do the same for me. So community is really important. That's why we have the TLB club, which is a membership community, because the people who are trying to build their businesses also want to learn how to speak. So we teach them how to speak, how to use digital content. And membership and community are really, really powerful things. So you want to find the ones that work for you. Don't spread yourself too thin on 10 different groups. Find the 2 or 3 that are awesome for you, and that's what you can and should
Yeah,
leverage. And then
100%. And that,
oh, go ahead, Melanie.
I was going to say, and that could be an association, it could be a mastermind, it could be a Facebook group. Like there's lots of different
Right.
ways to find speaker community. So don't limit yourself to just like official associations.
And I kind of want to transition this into the bureau thing. So getting an agent and speaker bureau. I mean, I will just share that for me it was very helpful. I was a solopreneur and I really disliked all the logistical stuff of emails and pitching and all that kind of stuff. And I already had a very strong thought leadership around. So I was getting a lot of inbound gigs. And even though I gave up some fee for that, they were also pitching me. And the two things that agency did for me was, one, gave me confidence about a higher speaker rate, which was great because I probably would have negotiated way down and they just stuck to their guns, right? And number two, they were getting me stuff that I wasn't getting because they were pitching my stuff. So for me, I was very happy with getting an agent. It definitely was, to me, the big things that changed what I was doing was getting a coach, getting a speaker agent, and getting a TEDx talk. All three of those things really elevated what I was doing as a speaker, because then I got to
Yeah.
start speaking around the world. But some people don't like agents, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But for me, it worked very, very well.
I think you made a really important point though, that you had inbound business already when you went and got an agent in a bureau. And I think that's the difference that people might not see if you're starting early. Bureaus and agents manage your demand. They don't always create demand if you don't have any, right? Like they don't want to take on a speaker right away if you have no experience, you don't
Right.
have a lot of testimonials. Like that's not financially advantageous for them. They want to take on someone like you, Bobby, who has done this a bit, you have some experience, they have inbound business coming in, and they can turn that around and make outbound pitches based on your existing demand. So I think especially if you're starting out, you think, okay, I haven't done much, but if I get an agent, then like that's the path, right? And really an agent or a bureau is sort of a next step when your demand exceeds what you can individually manage. And then you turn it over to a bureau and agent who can help not only manage that, but grow it, right? So don't feel like if you don't have an agent or you don't have a bureau, like there are speakers who make millions of dollars without a bureau, without an agent necessarily. It's just the kind of thing that once you have a lot of demand, it's a great option to have them manage that for you and then grow it.
I love that. Okay. Well, Lauren, any thoughts on? I mean, obviously you haven't got an agent, so you're already getting stuff on your own, which is great. I mean, if you're successful on your own, I think that you don't necessarily have to have a speaker agent. The truth is, and the fun fact is that in order to get a speaker agent, you need to actually have a flow of business. Like they don't want someone to just, unless you've done something amazing, like win 3 gold medals or go on the moon, then fine,
Yeah.
they'll hire you just like that. Like the
The
I
demand
mean,
exists.
yeah, so in Canada, we're all proud of Summer McIntosh, who got 3 gold medals and another medal. And so, yeah, she'll get a speaker agent, no problem, and be able to do stuff for
Yeah.
sure. So, which goes back to the topic about when to speak for free. So I know, especially now when you're established, and I've been speaking now for 20 years, do I still speak for free sometimes? Sure. And I see some people post something saying, oh, I never speak for free because I value my service and this is how I make my living and blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, my take is this: if someone I care about and love wants me to speak at their high school, whatever, like my nephew or my kids, I will do that, and I'll say, whoa, don't you have a fee? Like I wouldn't say that. If it's for a cause that I care about, I'm diabetic, and I've struggled with binge eating and eating disorder, binging disorder, and things like that, and body image. If someone wanted me to speak one of those things, I probably would do it because I think it's just really, really important to me. And of course, TEDx Talks, which is something I'm really big on, I would do those as well. But you know, like not all the time, and you have to. And there's ways to, as Melanie had said before, there's ways to find value in what you're doing. But I think that you know, and this is something that my good buddy, mentor Ron Tite told me many years ago. He's like, you know, it's totally fine to have 10, 20% of your time is to give back. So like once you're established, give back. It's totally fine. Don't ever feel bad about it. Just make sure you pick the right ones and don't, or, you know, do it all the time. So.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is doing it with intention and having some sort of parameters around it. Because especially if you're starting out and you're not super comfortable, like advocating for your fee or getting your expenses covered, it's really easy to fall into a trap where you're really busy and you're not making enough money to make it worth your time. So, if it's helpful for you, one thing that I did early on is I allowed myself one free gig per quarter, because that way I knew I had to sort of choose carefully. And sometimes it was a favor for a friend. Sometimes it was an event I cared about deeply. Now I don't have such a rigid like limitation for myself. I feel experienced enough to make those judgment calls on a case by case basis. But yeah, like if it's for a cause that you care about, that's a great reason to speak for free. It's your donation, right? You're donating your fee in support of a cause. If you're doing a favor for a friend, or it's somebody that you just care about and you do anything they asked you to help, then like you do that. There are opportunities where the exposure is worth it, like a TEDx event, or if you're invited to speak at the White House, or, I don't know, whatever's, your favorite sports team wants you to come speak to the team or something. Like you probably have those brands or places or causes that, you'd be convinced to do. I have said, and I'll keep putting it out into the universe, I want to go to Turkey so badly that if someone were to pay my way to Turkey, I'd be pretty likely to waive a fee or make it really low, because I want to go to Turkey. So you probably have those things. What I will also tell you is that there are a lot of events that will promise you exposure that are not worth that time. So you just have to be judicious and understand like what is worth it to me, not to them, because of course everyone asking you to speak for free thinks it's worth it, right? They all think it's worth it. So what's worth it to you? The cause, the destination, the company, like what is worth it to you is what you have to figure out.
I feel like Melanie just covered all of it.
Yeah, Melanie, you're rocking it. Thanks so much.
Response, yeah.
We have someone asked a question on one of the streams, is how do you what's the criteria for choosing a coach? Do you guys use coaching, and I have coaching for nutrition, I have coaching for my business, but any thoughts on that?
I've never hired a speaking coach, actually.
Well, just coach in general. I coach in general.
In general, yeah. Yeah, that's hard. I'm working with a business coach right now. It's my first time, and I think it's quite hard because the coaches can be expensive, and how do you know who's the right one? I feel like having community and again knowing other people who are doing similar things to you and leaning on their recommendations, that's usually the way I go. Like in the past, we're trying to get some recommendations, and it's how I'm going to keep figuring out who's best for me in the future.
This may be, as a marketer, sorry, I may about to do like the least marketing friendly thing. Generally speaking, I have a rule that if someone's pitching me to be my coach, I probably don't want them to be my coach, which sounds horrible. But it's like you said, Lorraine, the people that I get as a recommendation, like, hey, if Bobby were to say, I worked with this coach and they're amazing, then I'm probably sold. Like, I trust Bobby. I trust someone who Bobby trusts, right? That trust transfer is most important to me, because there are, and this is in every industry, every type of everything. The amount of people who make their money by teaching people how to do things they've never done successfully is really, really depressing. So you have to be really careful. Like, I will teach you to be a speaker. Like, what stages have you been on? I want to know how much money have you made speaking? Because otherwise I'm not sure that I want to learn from you. And it's not like a judgment call. It's more just like, if I'm making an investment, I want to invest in someone who has return on that investment that they can demonstrate. So yeah, the word of mouth for me on finding a coach is going to be the best, or someone who's worked with people that I can then follow up. I have had someone say, hey, this is a made up example, but if someone were to say, hey, I worked with Bobby and I saw that you're close with Bobby, like, are you looking for a coach? Because I have some openings. then I'd reach out to you, Bobby, and say like, hey, this person says they worked with you. Like, is that legit? What do you think? Like, are they for real?
And I'll say,
That could
run
work.
away, run away.
But yeah, like it's I think people who work with people I trust is probably the best path to
Yeah,
finding a coach.
yeah, the biggest thing is trust, right? So you trust when they have lots of testimonials. You trust that they have lots of experience and results. You trust that someone mentioned them to you, and you trust that you've been. So for me, the coaches that I've worked with, they didn't pitch me. I followed them for actually a year or two, loved their stuff, had multiple conversations, and eventually I decided to pull the plug and go for it, right? So in fact, all three of my coaches that I had over the years, actually, sorry, four of them, it was like that. It was like that. It took a long time before I actually decided to do it. That relationship had to build. So that's kind of what I did. Now I know we're getting to the end of our time. I want to before there's one more question that I want to get to, but I kind of want to leave it to you guys in terms of saying, like first off, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate you being here. This is live streaming everywhere: LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, lots and lots of places, YouTube. So you can ask questions, you can ping us, you can comment below, you can tag. And if you found some great value from this, you know what? Take a shot of the video, share it on socials, tag us, and we will love that. We love that kind of stuff because I mean, people say, how do I get Bobby's attention? Trust me, if you comment on my post at least 5 times, I will notice you because no one does, right? So like, who does that? I notice the ones who do it 5 times. If you take a post and tag me and share it, yeah, of course I'm going to notice it. Like, so you can't go wrong with gratitude. You can't go wrong sharing insights. So I encourage you all to do that. But Lorraine and then Melanie, I'd love to know
Mhm.
what is your where can people find you? Where do you want people to follow you? And maybe what's something you're working on coming up. So Lorraine, why don't you go first?
Sure. Well, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. So you can find me at Lorraine K. Lee. And I also have my newsletter link here. It's called Career Bites. It's bite-sized tips to supercharge your career in 3 minutes or less, and it's free. And I have 18 LinkedIn learning courses out. So you can find those at lorraineklee.com/LinkedIn learning. And then the last thing that's very relevant to this conversation is I am teaching the flagship public speaking course at Stanford Continuing Studies this fall. The Art of Public Speaking starts end of September. So would love to see you there.
All right, Melanie.
Yeah, you can find me. I've also placed my link below, melaniediesel.com. That's your central landing point for everything. You can find me across social. I spend more of my time on LinkedIn and Threads lately, so that's where I'm hanging out these days. If you're interested in learning, more about my books, it's on the website. About my speaking is on the website. And the Creator Kitchen, the mastermind and membership that I mentioned for creative folks, we are actually opening our enrollment tomorrow, the 22nd. So head over to creatorkitchen.com. You can learn more about what we're up to over there. And then we have actually talked about public speaking quite a bit. So it's something we can share more info on for you if it's of interest. But otherwise, you can find me. I'm search optimized. As long as you spell it right, you'll find me wherever you're looking.
Yeah, and for me, I'm everywhere. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I do Threads as well. Facebook. I'm on all the different platforms, but LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram are probably the three big that I use. Threads now, something I'm spending more time on as well. But LinkedIn is my primary that I use, and of course, I'm part of the TLB club, so you can join the TLB club. You can come to our weekly Zoom calls. We have one tomorrow with Donnie Boivin talking about how to network, how to network, not like a jackass is what he's talking about. So that'll be a great topic. It's free for the
Love
public to come by. It's on our website. You can check out the TLB Club website and learn more about that. And last question, actually, there's two now because someone just added one, but I'm going to just throw this one here, which is, what's the market on speaking virtually? Because man, I can tell you, virtual speaking, especially when it's like more than an hour. I did like this 3-hour thing, and I was wrecked. They have to pay for the fact that I'm gone the rest of the day because I'm so wrecked. But what are your thoughts on this? And Lorraine, I'll start with you, and then go to Melanie.
Yeah, well, I started off virtually, and I actually prefer virtual, so it might be opposite of what you two.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, starting off in person. I like virtual. I'm introverted, right? So I like sort of being in my space and at home, and not having to travel back and forth everywhere. Of course, maybe if an opportunity came up to go to Turkey, like Melanie's interested in, that would be super fun. But generally, like to stay virtual, stay at home. I think there's a market out there. I have heard from speaker bureaus saying, oh, it's all in person now. And I think for like the bigger stage sort of conference things, that's true. But I think there's a lot of companies that have distributed teams that still very much like bringing in virtual speakers to sort of equalize the opportunity that everyone can attend. So I'm still seeing a lot of opportunity there. I'm still doing a lot of virtual speaking.
Yeah, despite my dig for virtual speaking, it is a huge opportunity because my chagrin is that companies are now trying to do more virtual speaking than the in-person stuff. They don't want to fly me in because it costs them, and they can't get everyone there, and they think it costs more. I mean, I think it should be the same price, but they always try to price you down for virtual versus in person. So
Yeah.
companies are all doing virtual. It's a huge market. So I totally get it.
Yeah, echoing the same things. I think it's hard to imagine, but before COVID, there really wasn't that many virtual speaking
Yes,
opportunities. Like
true.
it seems crazy now that we just like Zoom 12 times a day, like it's nothing, and we all have like lights and microphones at home. But yeah, that was not there before, and it's a blessing that those opportunities are there now. I have found personally that the pay tends to be a lot lower for virtual than in person, or at least they always want it to be. You can
Yeah.
sometimes negotiate, but sometimes it may be worth it to folks to do 2 or 3 from the comfort of your home rather than getting on a plane and having to travel. So as long as you're being mindful about it and you know what you're getting into, it's I think it's wonderful that we have that opportunity now.
Yeah, because that's a great point. You actually have increased your opportunities that are out there too. So despite my complaint, I still try to keep them under an hour because I get really tired.
Oh, it's
Um,
tiring.
uh, but no, I totally understand that. So listen, I want to thank you guys for being here today. I want to thank everyone for being part of this live stream. Again, you'll be able to see the live stream. This is brought to you by the Thought Leadership Brand Club, which is a membership community helping small business owners, freelancers, side hustlers, and solopreneurs elevate their brand, elevate their business, elevate their sales, and whatever they're trying to do. And I'm going to just end the call by answering this one question, which is, what does thought leadership mean to me? And I'll just tell you, for me, thought leadership is a way for you to share your expertise, to be known for what you're an expert on, and be able to have influence because you're out there speaking, you're sharing knowledge, and you're building things. So I thought, they say that personal branding is what they say when you're not in the room. I thought leadership brand is what they say before you enter the room, while you're in the room, and even after you've left the room. And so, if you want to build thought leadership, it is the best way to elevate your brand, elevate your career, 10x your business and life. And if you want to do that, start networking, start speaking, start putting your new information out there, and try to make that impact. If you want to learn more about how to do that, join the TLB Club. So, thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Lorraine. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again. And feel free to follow these people and make sure to ask and ask any questions you have. Okay.